All right, it's fantastic to see the room filling up. I know many of you were in the waiting room, so we had quite a few registrants. So we're just going to give it a minute or two as the room fills up. So just hang tight as we wait patiently. Thank you. All right, thank you so much for those of you coming in. I know it's only a minute after, so we're going to give it another minute or so. We had quite a few registrants, and we know there were many who were waiting in the waiting room. So just hold tight, and we'll get started very soon. All right, thank you all very much for joining us. I can see the numbers going up a little more slowly. We're going to give it 30 more seconds here, and then we'll get started. All right, fantastic. We are really excited. So many of you are in the room with us this evening, or good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. Welcome to our event. We are thrilled you're here. Just to let you know, you are joining a live event for community college and transfer students, families, and counselors. My name is Adam Sapp. I am the Director of Admission at Pomona College, and I am one of the folks joining you tonight. Just to sort of give you a heads up about tonight's event, if you are a high school student currently completing dual enrollment courses, you might find tonight's presentation less helpful, in part because in our admissions process, we expect you will be applying as a first-year applicant. But all are welcome, especially those of you currently at a two-year college or community college or other transfer students. That may include those military veterans and military affiliated students. We're glad that you've joined us. I have to say, this week also happens to be National Transfer Student Week, and National Transfer Student Week celebrates transfer students and the professionals who support them on their journeys. Thank you for considering transfer, and we're really excited you're here tonight. But I've already talked a little too much. I want my fantastic colleagues to introduce themselves quickly before we continue on with the first part of our presentation, and we'll start with Lexi at Amherst.
Hi there, good evening, everyone. My name is Lexi Hurd. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the Associate Deans of Admission at Amherst College in Massachusetts. I've worked with our transfer students and our community college transfer students for about 10 years. So very excited to be here and tell you more about some of the opportunities we have.
Hi, everyone. Alex Buston from Princeton University. I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Admission and also the Director of Transfer and Military and Veteran Admission, and really excited to be with you here all tonight.
Hi, everyone. I am another Alex, Alex Diodezio at Williams College, and I manage the Transfer and Veteran Admission program for us. I'm also a Williams alum, class of 2011, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you all tonight.
And I am Patricia Way, Associate Director of Admissions at Yale. I review first-year and transfer applications. I'm also Director of Admissions for our Eli Whitney Students Program and Director of Veterans Outreach. Adam?
Fantastic. Thanks, Patricia. So why do the five of us travel together? It's very clear to us. We think it's obvious, but we really want to spell it out, just to be really clear that you understand our purpose tonight. And the first thing I would say is that we all five are global institutions with wide reach. We are all committed to the highest levels of research and scholarship, and we devote considerable human and financial capital to supporting our superb students who pursue the undergraduate education that they pursue at our institutions. We are all committed to providing incredible financial aid, and we are incredibly generous with our need-based financial aid programs. We provide some of the strongest financial aid packages to students in the country. Additionally, we are committed to access and inclusion. All 5 of us are proud of our diverse, engaged communities of students who come from all corners of the United States and beyond. And last but not least, we all like each other. The 5 of us have been recruiting this way for a couple of years now, and we couldn't quite get out into the world to host presentations because of the current situation, but we're thrilled to be able to be with you virtually. We are hosting this session this week, and then we have another session later this week with a focus on community college and transfer students. We know that you know this, but we think that students at community colleges and transfer students are rich in talent and energy, and we hope that today's session will help give you the tools that you need to prepare the best application possible. Couple of logistics tonight. So we know in this format, in the Zoom room, we have 2 options. We have a chat option and a Q&A option. We are not going to use the chat option. So just to make sure that's clear, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to those as we can. Eventually, we'll have a live Q&A and a submitted questions Q&A. We know many of you took the time to submit questions, and Alex Buston from Princeton will lead that in the second half of our program tonight. But we do want you to call us out, and if you have a specific question at Swarth, at Pomona, at Yale, at Williams, whatever that happens to be. If it's a general question, just ask the general question, and we'll likely get to it in the live Q&A portion. And finally, and this is important, we really want to acknowledge that we're coming to you virtually. We're in the middle of 2 pandemics, a global health crisis and a national pandemic of racism in this country. We hope that you're safe, and we hope that you're coping with all that's happening around us in this moment. All right, so let's get started. We do have a few common slides so that you can learn a little bit more about us. And Alex from Williams has moved the slide, which is fantastic. And I really want to talk for just a minute about some of the things that we think are important and the things that we share in terms of common philosophy. And to us, this is real simple. We believe in interdisciplinary learning and that diverse voices add real value. We think that studying across disciplines, many things at one time, and with many different people in the classroom is really important to learning. We also believe in learning beyond the major and that small classes are critical. And we believe that the small class environment, and all of us provide this, you'll hear more about this later, is really a catalyst for learning and engagement as you think about your major and your research and all of those things. We believe not all learning occurs in class. You're going to hear tonight about robust extracurricular activities, internship opportunities, ways in which we support students, some of which are connected to learning and others which are connected to outcomes, and that's critical too. And of course, we value the contributions of our transfer students, of our 2-year or community college students, and the contributions that our military affiliated students make, both in our classroom and beyond. We are all dedicated to supporting these students as they move through our institutions, whether they come for a couple of years or for more than that. We know that you can make a difference on our campus, and we're really excited to be speaking to you tonight. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide and we'll continue the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about building on what Adam was talking about in terms of the liberal arts philosophies. And I don't want to take for granted that many of you are familiar with the liberal arts and what that might mean. So we're going to spend a little bit of time going through that. So generally speaking, if you did look at any of the majors at any of our institutions, or you are thinking about what the liberal arts really is, you'll notice quickly what it's not. And the liberal arts is not training that's geared toward a very specific vocation or career path. We're really focused on broad learning outcomes, focusing on a skill set, a set of tools, really focusing on critical thinking, problem solving, the ability to communicate, and the ability to really look at particular situations, opportunities, problems from a broad range of perspectives, with a broad range of solutions as things evolve and change over time. You'll hear a little bit about our individual institutions down the road in this presentation. And although we do vary in size of our undergraduate population, something that we all have in common is that we have very small class sizes. So very small student to faculty ratios. And so we really do rely on dialogue and very close colloquy between and among our students and our staff and our faculty. And so that learning process that happens on all of our campuses is one that is something that is collaborative, it's evolving, it's meant to be alive and kind of a breathing thing. And that's true whether you're studying the natural sciences, mathematics, humanities and social sciences, foreign language, or any of the majors that we do offer on our campuses. To piggyback also on what Adam was saying, community college students are a vital voice on our campuses. And although we don't have very large numbers of transfer students on most of our populations, and we'll get into some of the specifics of that down the road, our professors deeply enjoy working with our transfer students and those who have come from two-year institutions. You're often very dedicated, purposeful, with lots and different ranges of life experiences and pathways to our particular institutions. And I think that that's really important in our classrooms and in our communities. So, we firmly believe that the educations that we have on our campuses are only really as valuable as the range of voices and the identities, and of course, the intersections of all of those different identities that we have on campus that we're available to hear. And the community college voice is a really important part of that. I did mention before that you can study the humanities, the social sciences, the natural sciences, foreign language, and the arts, all of which are thinking about the critical solutions and the critical issues that are stemming from some of those. So regardless of what it is that you hope to study, you're understanding the complexity that are going to things and the depth of things. And the pandemic is a great example of that. On the surface, the pandemic seems to be a scientific issue, which of course it is. We want to understand how this virus is working, how it's replicating, how we can get a vaccine or therapeutics to combat that. But of course, peeling back the layers of how to understand how this virus is affecting us is much more than scientific. Political, economic implications, psychological implications to this, of course, and sociological implications as we think about the pandemic disproportionately affecting Black and Brown communities across the country as well. So that's just a quick example of how a liberal arts philosophy would attack a problem like that, not from one particular solution, but from a range. I'll also mention that our schools are residential institutions. That does not mean that you need to live on our campuses, and some of our transfer students do choose to live off campus at each one of our institutions, but it really is an immersive experience. It's not the kind of experience where you're kind of going in, checking into classes and leaving. It's one that really you're thinking about this living and learning community as something that is a 24/7 kind of thing that you're opting into. And even if you choose to live off campus, many of our students will be on campus throughout the day, take their meals in our dining hall, spend a lot of time on campus in the evening studying in different spaces. So I do like to mention that as well. Our institutions tend to be very mission driven, very purposeful. You'll find that among a lot of private liberal arts institutions. And so we look for students that are going to take and engage with all of that are open to feedback, open to new perspectives, willing to have their assumptions challenged, and willing to change maybe some of their perspectives on something. And that's something that's really valuable about each one of our institutions. All of that sounds great, but we often get very valid questions about what you're going to do with that. And my mother still tells everyone I was a philosophy major. I attended Amherst myself. I was in fact a sociology major, so I have to go back and correct her often on that. But in some ways, that skill set that I gained from that is quite similar. I just choose to specialize in something a little bit different. I want you to know that all of us have very robust career centers. Our career centers are not just focused on, a senior that's graduating that needs a job. They work with our students from the second that you step foot on our campus to help you thinking about internship opportunities, of course, a job placement down the road, but also things like career prep about the kind of person that you want to be. You know, how do you want to affect the world down the road? I think that's a huge, huge thing that many of our students take very close to heart and very deeply. With that broad skill set that we have, our students have the flexibility and the adaptability to change industries. That's very common. That was my own particular pathway. I graduated from Amherst. I worked in business. Then I decided that I wanted to change industries. And of course, now I work in education. And you can always kind of have this skill set that you know you can make work in a global world with increasingly complex demands where new things are asked of people all the time, especially as technology is changing. And so the top industries that our students go into are business, finance, healthcare, education, law, and you will not see that undergraduate major necessarily represented among our institutions, but do know that our students find great success in those different fields if that's something that you're thinking about. And many of our students will go to graduate school, and that's a very, very common pathway for our students. And that juncture is often the time where many of our graduates, and about 80% of our graduates, if not more, at each one of our institutions are going to graduate school after graduating, are choosing those very professional degrees. So are thinking about an MBA or an MD, or I have a master's in education, for instance, or any of those different ranges in occupations. So they have a nice combination of having a broad undergraduate major or broad undergraduate skill set, and then a much more focused thing at a graduate school. Lastly, I just want to also mention that, you know, our alumni are very active. Our alumni love working with our undergraduate students, and our transfer alumni love in particular to work with our transfer students who have worked through the process. So we all have really great resources for you to connect with people in our career centers, to ask questions about job placement, how they found particular careers. Admission officer is not something that typically most people grow up and say they want to be, but I'll let you know it's a wonderful opportunity. And I think that was very helpful to me personally, was to be able to talk to different people so I could take different risks and understand that there are not necessarily always linear paths to a particular career or something like that, but there's a lot of different ways that you might do that. So do know that our institutions are very rich in that as well. With that, I think I might turn it over to talk a little bit about finances with Alex.
Thanks, Lexi. So next we'll talk about a topic that I know is very important to all of us, which is financial aid and affordability. And I know that we had a lot of questions that were submitted prior to the event regarding this topic. So we'll spend some time discussing the nuances of our particular financial aid programs. So first off, I'll say that, as Adam mentioned at the beginning, all of these institutions here today travel together partly because we all very much invest in affordability and prioritize financial aid. And that will continue to be true for us during this pandemic and during these kind of difficult times. We'll continue to offer the same amount of financial aid that we always have. I'll also put words on the fact that we are all private institutions, and we all often encounter the thinking from students that because we're private colleges, we're just way too expensive for students, that certain students can't afford us, that our sticker price is just too high. And I want to just debunk that right from the beginning and say that we actually offer some of the most generous financial aid programs in the country. And often we can actually be the most affordable option for students, even more affordable than the public in-state options that you might have. And so we'll talk a little bit about how that works. Part of it is that we really offer need-based aid programs. And so what that really means is that you're going to be applying for financial aid with us through some type of financial aid application. It might be the FAFSA, the CSS profile, an institution-specific file, whatever it is, you're going to send in those financial aid applications, and our financial aid office is going to review those and see how much you or your family can pay toward college. And that however much you can pay, then we'll see, well, how much more does the student need beyond that to cover the cost of attendance? And I'll talk a little bit more about that term, but to cover the cost of attendance at our institutions. And that's what we'll do our best to address through our financial aid programs, that however much more you need beyond what you can pay. So we really have this focus on need-based aid rather than scholarships to make sure that we're giving financial support to the students that really need it most, and to make sure that we're making ourselves an affordable option for as many folks as we possibly can, and certainly for transfer students as well. And you'll hear some more from us as we talk about our specific institutions, but we are all offering very generous financial aid packages to our transfer students. And often our transfer students are paying nothing at all to attend our campuses. We also think about this idea of need on a really comprehensive level. So we're really thinking about this term cost of attendance. And what cost of attendance is really referring to is certainly your tuition and the cost of your classes, but also your housing and your food and your living expenses, and potentially travel back and forth to a place that you call home over breaks. All of those many things that come into play when you're choosing to attend our campuses, we do our best to address those types of things from the get-go, books as well. All of those pieces get kind of factored into the financial aid program, so that again, we are doing our best to address those costs right from the forefront and making sure that you can focus on really being a student. We also think about that comprehensive cost, even in terms of the application process itself. So often there's a fee associated with applying to a college. Some of us have no fee at all for transfer students. Some of us have a small fee, but we're happy to provide fee waivers. And you can simply reach out to the admission officer here or to the admission office generally at the institution you're applying to and simply ask, can I get a fee waiver? I can't afford the application, and we'll be happy to provide those for you. So we're really trying to think very broadly about making sure that we're addressing those kinds of obstacles that often come up for students. We do also have some benefits that are specific to veteran students. So we are all Yellow Ribbon program participants with very generous amounts of matching funds available, as well as a very high number of participants that are allowed on each of our campuses. We have a lot of flexibility with the post 9/11 GI Bill benefits. So veterans on our campuses can choose to use the GI Bill benefits towards their cost of attendance. And often you get institutional aid on top of that to really make sure that, again, we're addressing your full cost of attendance. But you can also choose to hold on to those GI Bill benefits, to use them at a later time, such as graduate school, and instead focus solely on institutional aid to meet your need for the time that you're at our campuses. Either option is available to you, and you're really able to do whatever works best. In general, all of the pieces that I'm talking about, how much money you might need, how much financial aid you might receive, that's all separate from the admission process. So we are all need blind, and we don't factor in how much money you need or again, don't need as part of the application review process. And then the other benefit that we're able to offer as smaller institutions that really are able to focus on a really individual level on our transfer students is that we have a very student-centered, individualized process throughout the financial aid process. So that includes when you're applying for financial aid. Part of the reason why some of us require the CSS profile or those other lengthy applications that sometimes feel a bit difficult because there are just so many questions that get asked. Part of why we require that is because by asking all of that information and getting all of the details of your situation, we're able to provide you even more financial aid. And we want to make sure that we're providing you everything that you need. So we're able to take into account things like household size, or is there an older grandparent in your house that you're helping to pay medical costs for? Those kinds of special situations that arise, we're able to factor those into our thinking. And then on the back end as well, as you go through the financial aid process and get your package, you have questions, we're available to set up one-on-one conversations with you. If there's something unexpected that comes up and you need us to discuss that and think about that, we can have those kinds of conversations with you. So we're really able to walk through the process with you side by side to make sure that we're coming up with a product at the end of the day, a financial aid package that's going to work best for you. We really believe deeply that there's an importance in investing in students so that you can come to our campuses and take advantage of everything that we have to offer. And with that, I will pass it over to Patricia.
Thank you, Alex. I know many of you have been asking questions about the admissions process, both in the chat and in the pre-submitted questions that you've submitted. So I'm happy to discuss how we review applications. That said, I cannot give you an easy answer about your likelihood of admission because we do not base our admissions decisions solely on GPAs or test scores. Our admissions committees take many factors into consideration when evaluating applications. We have admitted students with somewhat softer GPAs, and we have denied students with perfect grades. I understand that this makes our admissions process seem more mysterious because we cannot provide you with an algorithm or formula, but I can talk to you about what we look for in a whole person review process. Certainly an applicant's potential to thrive academically at our colleges is a paramount consideration. There are many ways for us to determine how a student might perform academically on our campuses. The transcript, for one, gives us a history of the courses you have taken. The longer a student has been out of high school, the less emphasis the admissions committee will place on the high school record. We have admitted students with weak high school grades. For example, one current Yale student did not go to college right after high school, but when he did resume his education, his academic transition was still quite rocky, but he showed a strong upward trajectory in his academic performance. He ended up receiving A's in his most recent classes. We expect applicants to present strong recent academic credentials with grades mostly in the A range, preferably in liberal arts and science courses. While transcripts provide us helpful quantitative information on how students have performed academically, letters of recommendation are another way for us to see how a student would add to the classroom. While not all references need to be academic ones, recommendations from your instructors give us an idea of your learning styles, intellectual depth, contributions to the classroom, and engagement with peers and faculty. We also pay close attention to the essays because they provide us with information about your writing ability, the depth of your academic interest, and how thoughtful you are. Some of us have been test optional for transfer students for a long time now and do not require either the SAT or the ACT. Others of us normally do require testing as part of our admissions process, but we are more flexible about this requirement this year, given the limited testing availability as a result of the COVID pandemic. All 5 of our institutions here are test optional this year, meaning that SATs and ACTs are not required. Beyond looking at academic potential, the admissions committee is also trying to determine how an applicant will contribute to our campus community. Your resume or list of non-academic engagements helps us understand how you might take advantage of our college resources and how you would engage others on campus. As you have already heard from my colleagues tonight, we actively seek out community college students because you bring valued perspectives to our campuses. The essays may shed light on your background, your life experiences, your sense of otherness, what you're thinking about, and what is important to you. Some of us may offer interviews, which is another way for the admissions committee to learn more about you. From all of the admissions materials I have mentioned, we can get a picture of how you may have positively impacted your classrooms, colleges, families, workplace, or local communities, which in turn can help us better understand how you would perform academically at our institutions and how you might contribute to our campuses. I realize that with the pandemic, there may be kind of fewer extracurricular activities that you might be able to participate in, but we're not just looking for structured activities. We are thinking about how you have engaged others, and your essays and all these other materials can provide us with some of that information. And maybe it's helpful for me to give you a concrete example. We had a Yale student who attended a 4-year college right after high school. But because of personal and family reasons, he did not do well academically and ended up failing a few classes. He dropped out of college and worked as a pharmacy technician for a few years before returning to school. His second stint at college was at his local community college. He was more mature by then and ended up getting grades mostly in the A range. He made a strong impact at his community college and in his local community by volunteering a significant amount of time tutoring students. His instructors at his local community college all confirmed this, and they raved about his contributions to the classroom and to the college. From his interview, we got a sense that he would very much add to the discussions both inside and outside of the classroom, and that he's committed to giving back. We have certainly admitted many students who have had consistently strong academic records, so I'm not suggesting that we accept only students with blemishes on their transcripts or only non-traditional students. But I use this example simply to illustrate our whole person review process. I have provided you examples of Yale students, but I think both of my examples pertain to the other colleges here too. Though our admissions process is quite competitive and there's no guarantee of admission, I would encourage you to apply if you have a strong recent academic record, wish to pursue a liberal arts education, and want to actively engage a campus community. Of course, you should also be sure to apply to colleges with a range of selectivity. I also want to touch briefly on the topic of transfer of credits. A few of you may end up applying as first-year students, but probably most of you will be applying as transfers. Students are eligible to submit transfer applications if they will have at least 1 year's worth of transferable credits so that they're entering our colleges as sophomores or juniors. Because our applicants apply to transfer from colleges from across the country and from all over the world, we do not have a list of pre-approved classes that are transferable. Usually courses are transferable if they're similar to the classes offered at our institutions. This means that liberal arts and science courses such as history, calculus, science, English, economics, these are most likely to be transferable. And some of your colleges may call these general education courses. Business, communications, criminal justice, and military classes are unlikely to transfer because we do not offer these subjects at our colleges. While the admissions committee will take into consideration performance in online classes when evaluating applications, courses taken online are usually not transferable. And this does not mean that you should not take online classes. If online classes are the only courses that are available to you, by all means take them, as they will prepare you for rigorous classes at our colleges. You should note that given the impact of COVID-19, some of us may be more flexible about online classes this year. This is especially true for spring and fall 2020 classes that began in person, but ended up being virtual because of the pandemic. Though not all credits are transferable, please, please, please do not despair. Many of our students appreciate the ability to spend more time on our campuses, especially since financial aid is so generous. Each of our colleges have slightly different credit transfer policies, so do not be shy about reaching out to us to ask institution-specific questions. My colleague Alex from Princeton will now provide you with some tips that will be helpful to you as you prepare to submit college applications.
Thank you, Patricia. So as was mentioned, I'll give a little bit more context for using the information that was provided previously about how our processes work, how our institutions work, and what does that mean for your approach? And just things to keep in mind as you look towards the next approach, wherever you might be in that process, whether you've been thinking about this kind of application for a while, or maybe this is the first time you thought about these institutions. We want to help you and just give you some more context for the next steps. And I think something that's really been impressed here a few times is don't rule out colleges that maybe seem too selective or too expensive. Don't make your decisions based on what that sticker price is or based on what the admit rate is or whatever. You don't know what your individual sticker price is or what your individual admit rate is without submitting an application, because that's not representative of who you are, what your talents are, and what your potential is at our institutions, regardless of where you come from, whether you are a traditional student, a non-traditional student, someone who was always a great student in high school and through college, or someone who just recently found their academic trajectory. All of the above cases exist at all of our individual institutions. It's really about what has happened most recently, how you contextualize that. So just as Patricia was saying, we see the range of students that we have. But really the most important thing is what's the best, most indicative of what kind of student you are now and you're going to be at our next institutions. So strong recent academic coursework, whether that's the entire time you've been at college, plus high school, whatever, or maybe, like I said, you just found your academic trajectory and your academic strength recently. That's what we want to see. And that can absolutely overcome past poor performance, whether it's, like I said, poor grades in high school, or the first time at college didn't work out, the second time or whatever. We're looking at you for the academic student you are and the academic record you have today, not the academic record you had 5 years ago, because that's a student you were 5 years ago or whatever. So again, selecting courses that are in rigorous areas and that match the kind of rigor and type of courses that you're interested in, but also that we offer, are the best way to demonstrate recent academic work. So that cumulative GPA or whatever, it doesn't matter as much to us. So don't worry too much about us seeing all those transcripts. We're just trying to get a sense of your trajectory, but we really want to focus on what you've done in the last couple years or so. And then also, again, don't be nervous about applying. We're here. As Adam said, virtually, we'd love to be here in person, shaking your hand and talking to you about this process. But we want to be available and accessible to you the best way we can. So, we're going to try to answer every question we can. The Q&A box is popping, which is great. We got a lot of questions ahead of time. We're not going to be able to answer all of them, but get in touch with us afterwards. We'll give you our email addresses down the road and connect with our students as well. That was another question that came up a lot in advance. How do we talk to your students, what the experience was like for transfer students. We can tell you a little bit about what it's like and what systems there are, but they are the best resources to give you a sense of their individual experiences. So check out our web pages where we have a lot of information about blogs and social media and stories, especially for this week, since we're highlighting some of their stories for National Transfer Week. There are a lot of ways to kind of get in touch with our students and get us get information on their experience as well. Another thing to keep in mind, and this has also come up a lot, is don't limit your definition of what an extracurricular activity is. We'll talk about how involved our students are on our campuses, which is great, but not everyone has necessarily had the same opportunity to do that one way or the other. And really keep in mind here this is a very individualistic determination. Very at its most basic level, an extracurricular activity for us is anything you're doing when you're not in class or studying or sleeping. So that might involve activities that you get involved in because you're passionate about certain organizations or causes or activities, or it might be things you have to do based on family responsibilities or a part-time job or a full-time job or whatever. Those are equivalently valuable to us because they indicate, in some cases, you pursuing opportunities you can, if you can, but if you can't and you're doing other things, that indicates to us strong time management skills alongside your transcript, your academic work that you're doing on top of that, and indicates to us that you have that capacity to still be a meaningful contributor, even if it might be in a very different capacity when you do come to our campuses, when you're not necessarily working part-time or full-time as much and are able to get involved in those areas. So, but make sure you do contextualize that on the application. If you feel like, you want to give us more information about family responsibilities, this is something I think a lot of students leave out, that they don't think the hours per week of their family responsibilities matter to us. It absolutely does, because again, that contextualizes your day-to-day, your week-to-week, and what you're doing on top of your academic coursework, whether again, it's activities you choose to do or those that you do out of necessity or both. Connect with your college, connect with the support at your college. We're here to work with you on our side, but if you have a good, whatever that looks like at your college, many of you might have transfer counselors or PTK advisors, Phi Theta Kappa advisors, honors college directors. These, in many cases, varies from school to school, but in many cases, they are familiar with this process on your side of the process, more so than we are, maybe more so than you are. So seek out these resources. Even if you haven't talked to them yet, they're there to work with students like you. Again, this varies in various institutions about what's available, but if you have those resources, take advantage of them because they can help you. You're not at a disadvantage if you don't happen to have those resources. We're there to try to help you bridge that gap as well, but if you have them, definitely take advantage of them. And then the second to last point I want to talk about here is kind of an answer I would give to, I think a lot of you sort of asked this in your, I've encountered this a lot, but also in the advanced questions is, how do I get a competitive edge, in terms of what is a very competitive process? And the way I would think about this is not kind of what kind of formula or what kind of hoops do you have to jump through that we're expecting you to do. Think of your edge being how you convey your experiences, your story, and your perspectives. Because again, it's not just about, are you going to do the work academically at our colleges? Are you going to get involved in this activity or Y activity or whatever? But also, what kind of contributions, what kind of community member are you going to be in terms of who you are, where you've come from, and what your perspectives are? So speak about that on the application. And to the extent that it might align with the ethos of the school or the community that particularly appeals to you about the school, whether it's one of the five of us or whatever school you're looking at, that's helpful to know in the application. That's given us a good sense about when you're writing about yourself in the application, you're writing about yourself, thinking about how you are a good fit or a good match for the next step, whether that's Princeton, Yale, Amherst, Williams, Pomona, or whatever that might be. And then the last point I would mention is not necessarily just for non-traditional students. I would say for anyone who has had unusual circumstances, whether it is a non-traditional trajectory, whether it is significantly adverse circumstances, or whatever else you want to tell us, use those additional information sections or the resume or whatever to give us a sense of what that trajectory is. Because without that information, again, it's very hard for us to contextualize what you've been through and what perspectives you've been through. Don't feel like you shouldn't mention things if there are mistakes you made or whatever, adverse circumstances that were outside of your control, or maybe some that were in your control. You weren't ready or a mature student then, but you are now. Again, that's what we're looking for now. So I think getting a sense of understanding what those individual circumstances are and how they've impacted your growth to this point and then on to the next level, that's really helpful for us. So don't neglect saying that in the application process, because that really helps us get to know, again, your entire story. So hopefully that's a good, a little bit of background on kind of how you should approach this process, depending on where you are in it as well, kind of broadly in chronological order, but again, that can vary on where you are. So now I want to switch gears a little bit. We've given you some common information and philosophies and tips that we would all share. And now, as Adam mentioned, we're going to go into a very quick overview of each of our institutions to give you a little bit of a flavor of the characteristics. So to start alphabetically, we'll go back to Amherst and I'll pass it off to Lexi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Alex. And those are some awesome tips. So a little bit about Amherst College specifically. I want you to all know, if you've not heard of some of the institutions here tonight, that is totally fine and very normal. Most of the transfer students that we interact with and work with, it's very interesting because we can interact with them for 1 year and then a year later, they never would have imagined that they'd be on some of our campuses. And that's sort of what brings us here today to tell you about some of these opportunities. So Amherst College itself, we are a small residential liberal arts college of about 1,850 students, and we're located in a town called Amherst, Massachusetts. We're entirely undergraduate. That is not to say that our students don't have wonderful graduate school careers at other institutions after graduating from Amherst, but it does mean that all of the resources that we have at our institution are geared 100% toward the undergraduate experience. About an hour and a half west of Boston and about 3 hours north of New York City, and a wonderful town that's sort of a quaint balance between having a decent amount of things to do, but also a lot of outdoor space as well. We have a 7-to-1 student faculty ratio, and about 80% of our classes have fewer than 30 students. Two distinctive features about Amherst that I like to talk about. One is our open curriculum, and the other is the 5-college consortium. So unlike many institutions, we do not have any general education requirements, nor do we have any distribution requirements at our institution. So we do require full-time enrollment, and we do require that you have a major and you complete that major in the time that you have on our campus, which for transfer students is somewhere between 2 to 3 years. So it makes it very flexible to kind of choose your own adventure academically, to take the classes that are most interesting to you, and to have some room to explore and evolve over the course of your collegiate education as well. About 45% of our students double major. Many students also study abroad. And the other piece is that we have the 5-college consortium at our fingertips. So even though we are a small institution, we have the resources at a much larger group of schools right at our fingertips. And there's about 30,000 undergraduate students that are right in our local area. You can take classes at these institutions. You can also participate in any of the social clubs or extracurriculars on these campuses as well. Free bus system. It connects all of the local areas. It goes into all of the residential areas, totally free. Just show your ID, hop right on. And so that's a great thing that I like to advertise as well. You see some of the aspects of our transfer student community highlighted down there. I'll just note very briefly, beyond what you can read, is that Amherst has been working very closely with our community college transfer initiative since about 2005. We received a grant from the Jack Kent Cook Foundation, which some of you may be familiar with, to begin working with our transfer students. And so we've had a wonderful relationship with our community colleges, both across the country and of course in our backyard for a long time. And any specific questions you have, do feel free to drop those in the chat. But I will pass it along to Pomona to tell you a little bit about their institution.
All right, thanks, Lexi. So I am back and I'm really excited to tell you about life in California. Pomona College is located in Claremont, California. We're 35 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. We are a liberal arts and sciences institution. There were a few questions there about what is the liberal arts and science and how does that work? And so just to make sure that that's clear, the liberal arts and sciences, all of us offer liberal arts and sciences courses. Pomona included. In fact, 38% of Pomona students major in the natural sciences. Our academics are divided into 4 buckets: the natural sciences, social sciences, arts and humanities, and interdisciplinary studies. And so we are going to allow you to take one of 48 majors. You'll be on a campus where we guarantee housing for you for all of the time that you're on campus, and you'll be in an incredibly diverse and rich environment. The majority of our first-year students for the last 3 years have identified as domestic students of color. We at Pomona have a transfer community that happens to be exceptionally diverse, in fact, more diverse than our first-year student class. And also we have wonderful support for documented and undocumented students. And so if you have DACA or you are undocumented and not eligible for DACA, we have a significant community on campus and are happy to support you there as well. We have transfers that come from California community colleges, from 4-year institutions, from community colleges outside of California. We do make a soft commitment that about half of the students we enroll as transfer every year will come from community colleges or two-year schools. This keeps the community robust and dynamic, which we are excited about. This group also often includes military students and military affiliated students, including veterans. We have a great healthy veteran and military affiliated community as well. And there is significant support for you, both with strong financial aid, as Alex talked about, as well as some extra funding we have from the Amundsen Foundation to support student clubs and activities, particularly related to veterans. Our faculty are super excited to work with you. You can transfer in after your first year. I know it's very common, particularly in California, to have completed that second year to get the associates and then transfer on. You don't have to do that. You can apply after just 1 year. We're happy to welcome you to campus and house you. And the community building aspect is really important. We are part of the Claremont colleges. We include Claremont McKenna College, Pomona, Pitzer, Harvey Mudd, and Scripps College. The 5 of us form a consortium of schools. You attend one school, you take classes at multiple schools. It really is an incredible resource and opportunity for you to expand the courses you take, the majors you might take, the extracurricular activities you pursue, and you really get that 5-for-1 experience. So if any of this appeals to you, I look forward to hearing more in the questions. Just sort of at me at Pomona as you walk through. But let's head back to the East Coast and learn a little bit about Princeton.
Thank you, Adam, for that jaunt back to California. We have a lot of Californians in attendance tonight. Very excited about that. Also, a good New Jersey cohort. So glad to see you all here as well. Fitting for my presentation just on where we're located at Princeton University. Easy to remember, we're in the township of Princeton, New Jersey, right in the middle of the great state. It's a small suburban town that sits really in between New York City and Philadelphia, about 55 miles away from either. They're all both very accessible, easily accessible by a train that comes on campus. So a good balance between, having an immediate, small, quiet, safe college town as your immediate setting, but great access to major cities. We combine being a major research university with also a small liberal arts college. We have almost twice as many undergraduates as graduate students, and that is by design. So you have at Princeton what feels like the sort of small liberal arts college that you heard about at Amherst and Pomona. We'll also hear about from Williams, but also major academic resources and research as some of the best resources and faculty available in the world, in the country, working with our undergraduates, very lopsidedly dedicated towards our undergraduates. And that allows us to guarantee not just small class sizes with our 5-to-1 student faculty ratio, for example, but also independent research opportunities for every single undergraduate. It doesn't matter what major you are, where you came from, or what you're planning on doing. Everybody gets the opportunity to work one-on-one with our faculty on campus at Princeton and conduct independent original research. We also guarantee housing for all students, for all undergraduates, for all years of attendance. You're only required as a transfer or a veteran student to live on campus for 1 year, which is your first year of entry at Princeton, but it's guaranteed for all 4 years. For all years rather of your degree. And family housing is available for non-traditional students coming with families as well. We tend to guarantee that too. Speaking a little bit about the transfer program, you may have heard a few years back, Princeton did not have a transfer program. So why are we here? It's because we do have a transfer program now. It was reinstated for fall 2018 entry, specifically with community college students and U.S. military veterans in mind. They were expressly mentioned by our president and trustees in terms of the reason for bringing back this program. It's a fall term entry program only. The application deadline is March 1st. The application was just launched on Common and Coalition application last Thursday, October 15th, so submit at any time till March 1st. We admit about between 13 and 15 transfer students every year, so it's a small cohort, but again, it is almost 100% community college students or veterans. Again, because they are our target population and the students that we look to bring in through the transfer program. And they're all supported by our Director of Transfer, Veteran, and Non-Traditional Student Programs, who works with every student who identifies as any or all of those categories. And he is the primary support for academic and non-academic advising. And Princeton has an incredibly generous financial aid program, as was talked about earlier. Most of our students the majority of our transfer students are qualifying for full financial aid or very close to it. Because of these resources that we have to provide them. So I think I've gone over time, so apologies for that. The link at the bottom, though, please refer to that for more information on the actual transfer process and how to apply. But now I'm going to pass it back up to Massachusetts to Alex D. to talk about Williams.
Thanks, Alex B. So we are the other small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, and we are Williams College. So Williams College is about 2,200 students, and we are also pretty much an undergraduate only institution. So a strong focus there with a ton of students that go on to really top level graduate schools as well. Our curriculum is really set up to allow for a ton of freedom and exploration. So students are really able to take the classes that they most want to take, really be able to shape your path around your particular interests and passions. And each student really is able to craft their own kind of journey in that way because we have such a low number of requirements. We also offer a really unique type of class at Williams called the tutorial class. And we're pretty much the only college in the United States to offer this type of class. And it is a class with 2 students and 1 professor. So pretty much as small as you can get as far as classes go. It creates a really intimate learning environment, a way to really deeply dive into interesting academic questions. And it's a totally different structure from typical class as well, that's really based on exchange and dialogue and feedback. So those are offered in all of our 64 different areas of study. At Williams, there's a strong focus on having a really tight-knit community, partly because we are a small institution, partly just because it's something that's really special that I think happens at Williams, but there's just an active effort by everybody, faculty, staff, students, to really create a warm and welcoming community, and you're able to develop really close relationships with fellow students, with the transfer community, with your professors, with really everyone across campus, which really just opens up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities, such as research, which is really widely available. And alongside that, we offer a lot of support and resources for students on a variety of levels. So academic resources such as free tutoring, a free writing center, also socio-emotional resources like free therapy for all students, as well as the financial resources that have already been mentioned. But those really continue even once you come to campus. So beyond financial aid, funding for unpaid internships, or funding for going to present research at conferences across the country, all of those types of things as well, to really make sure you're able to take full advantage of the campus experience. For our transfer and veteran community specifically, we have 22 transfer and veteran students on campus right now, and it's a community that we're really excited to grow at Williams also. And we offer really a lot of individualization for this community. So that happens on the level of housing, where we really work with students to find the housing arrangement that's going to work best for them. The majority of our transfer and veteran students live on campus, and on-campus housing is guaranteed, but we also give them the opportunity to live off campus and campus-owned off-campus housing. We also offer a lot of flexibility with transferable credit. So however much transferable credit you bring in, you have the option to relinquish some of that, start over as a first-year student, start over as a sophomore student, whatever it may be, and your financial aid will carry with you. We also have a Dean of Transfer and Veteran students that will be there to support you along the way with any questions that you have. You can see our deadlines here on the slide. The transfer deadline is fall entry only, and that's March 1st. We do have an upcoming event on October 30th, our Transfer and Veteran Virtual Open House that I encourage you to sign up for if you're curious to learn more about Williams. And I'm always available for questions as well, so please don't hesitate to contact me. But I will hand it over to Patricia now.
Thank you, Alex. This is a very timely session because Yale's President Salovey just announced last week that Yale wants to expand the number of community college students transferring to Yale and to expand our Eli Whitney Students Program for non-traditional students. For those of you not familiar with Connecticut, Yale is located right in downtown New Haven, a small city with a population of about 130,000 people, and is conveniently located between New York City and Boston along the I-95 corridor. I like to say that New Haven is large enough to be interesting, yet small enough to be friendly. There are over 100 restaurants within walking distance of the New Haven Green, and New Haven has the second largest collection of free public art of any city in the United States. Most people don't know that. Yale is the largest university among this group of 5 colleges here tonight. Like Princeton, we are both a research university and a liberal arts college. Our 6,000 undergraduates can take advantage of many of the resources of our 13 graduate and professional schools. For example, Akhil Amar is a renowned constitutional law expert who teaches at the Yale Law School, who also teaches an undergraduate constitutional law class every year. Another example, Professor Sandy Chang is a Yale Medical School professor, but he teaches an undergraduate class on cancer. Many of our undergraduates do research in some of our 1,200 laboratories. While we are a major research university, Yale College is also a liberal arts college, and we place special emphasis on undergraduate learning. The student to faculty ratio is only 6:1. 3/4 of our classes have 20 students or fewer in them. We have multi-tiered advising. A vast majority of our students do some type of research during their tenure at Yale, and they can even sign up for their own personal librarian, which I think is pretty cool. There are 3 pathways to apply to Yale, and I have noted the application deadlines on this slide. The first year and transfer programs are pretty self-explanatory. The Eli Whitney Students Program is a more flexible program designed specifically for adult students wishing to pursue a traditional Yale undergraduate education. Eli Whitney students receive the same bachelor's degrees as other Yale undergraduates and have access to the same classes, majors, facilities, research opportunities, abroad opportunities. But they have the option to take classes full or part-time. They live off campus, and financial aid is somewhat different. Examples of Eli Whitney students include veterans of the US military, parents whose education were interrupted because they were raising families, and people who took time off to pursue professional commitments. I'll be hosting 2 Yale-specific seminars, one for student veterans and one about our Eli Whitney Students Program on November 8th and November 15th, respectively. You will all receive an email in the next week or 2 with more information about these Yale information sessions. Our admissions website also has a lot of information about each of these 3 pathways. If you're not sure which of these programs is the right fit for you, do not hesitate to reach out to me after this webinar. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And as you can see from this last bullet, nearly half the students admitted to the transfer in Eli Whitney programs transferred from community colleges. Not all of our students come from community colleges, but it's a pretty significant percentage. We think that community college students really do add much to our campus. And I'm sure that you all have questions for us, more questions. So I will turn the presentation over to Alex Buston from Princeton, who will moderate the Q&A.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you to everyone here for wrapping up the formal part of the presentation and the transitioning to the next segment where we talk about your questions, as Patricia said. As you may know, we've had a lot, as I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of great engagement with the Q&A box, which is still going, and a lot of you submitted. We got hundreds of questions in advance. Thank you all for sending that for this session alone. We will do our best to answer all of them, or at least talk about the themes that are relevant to all of them. We may not be able to get to every single question that was typed because there is limited time, and you are probably not looking to be on Zoom for longer than you have to be. So we want to respect your time as well. But let's move on to the Q&A. Just want to point out on the Q&A slide, we do have just the basic information about our contact information. As we mentioned, do feel free to reach out to us. There's more information that we can provide and continue the conversation going forward, whether it's with us or with our current students. So as we work on moving towards that, I want to start with some of the questions that were submitted in advance as well as live. And this is Patricia. This is a question that came up a couple times, specifically to students who are in community college working towards their associate's degree. Is it possible or preferable to apply before or after completing, or kind of before having the intention of completing associates? Like, how would you advise on the timing for that?
Sure, Alex. For us, I'm sure sort of probably for all of our institutions here, the degree does not necessarily matter. It's really the courses that you've taken and the fact that you've taken time to show sort of a strong trajectory. So it doesn't actually matter whether you have an associate's degree when you apply to Yale. We do encourage students to take liberal arts and science courses and to present strong recent academic credentials, but whether or not you will have received your associate's degree doesn't matter so much in the admissions process.
Absolutely. And also one thing I should also mention, in addition to our email addresses we have here, if you didn't happen to register for this session, most of you did and got the link that way. Apologies for anyone who had any issues with the link. You were able to join us. We're glad you're here. But if you did get the link elsewhere and didn't register at first, we do ask that you go ahead and do that anyway. That will put you in our system and have you as connected with all 5 of us. And then also, we do plan to send more information, including a recording of the session after this session and then also after Sunday's session as well. So we'll make sure that you get that as well. So go ahead and register for that if you haven't already. So again, continue to use the Q&A tool to send in your questions, and we'll continue to answer as many as we can. Another question that came a few times in advance was specific to the transfer student communities that we have on our campus, and how can we continue to connect with those students? I talked about it a little bit earlier in my slides. So I'll just mention our web pages, especially most of us have web pages specific to transfer students where we kind of list the requirements and everything, but there's also good engagement there with the overall communities we have, whether it's student blogs, whether it's social media, especially like I said this week when we're trying to highlight transfer students. But again, you could also just email us or reach out to us. You know, we have a transfer association on Princeton, as many of us do, and we can connect you directly with the leadership who are always interested in speaking to these students. But so another question that came up in advance was what in terms of the timing for applying for financial aid, is this more, does it make sense to apply this, you know, before applying for admission, during, or after? Alex D, can you speak to that timeline a little bit more?
Sure. So as far as applying for financial aid, we'll all have our own specific deadlines for when those financial aid applications are due. And you'll want to do your best to meet those deadlines to get the financial aid applications in before that. But as far as how far before those deadlines you need to submit the financial aid applications, there's really no specific requirement. Best to do it earlier, just in case you end up missing a certain document and there's communication with the schools that need to happen. But generally speaking, that can be kind of at the same time as your application. It might be right after submitting your application, but it'll kind of depend a little bit on how early you submit your admissions application as well. But I would say it's pretty similar timelines. Like I said, making sure that you leave yourself plenty of time to give all of the attention that you need to the admission application as well as to the financial aid application, especially since some of the financial aid applications, as I mentioned, can be a bit long and take some time. So you'll want to make sure to schedule in enough time to do those well.
Absolutely. So keep in mind the information we have on our website. So it's usually for financial aid as well. And don't worry about, you know, for private institutions necessarily running out of financial aid for transfer students, especially because we are looking to support them as well. So this question just came through live, Lexi, which I'll pass on to you. And we also saw this in some of the advanced submissions as well. What changes have our schools and processes made due to COVID? As processes, meaning the transfer application admission process, how has COVID kind of shifted that for us this year?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I just want to say like a big kudos to all of you who are going through this process of thinking about where to transfer in the middle of this pandemic. It's a stressful process to do this at any time of year, at any time period, but particularly stressful in the midst of, you know, your particular institutions, which are probably facing changes just like ours are currently. So I just wanted to give you a round of applause for that. And I'm sure our other panelists feel the same exact way. Most of our institutions specific to transfer students have loosened slightly our policies, particularly starting in spring 2020 and into this year, about some of the online credit. Some of that will still be institution specific. So it is good to reach out to us, but specifically, you know, a year ago, if you had asked us the question if we accept any online credit, our answer largely would have been no. But as our institutions have also moved to some remote learning in some capacities at each of our institutions, our faculty and our registrars are recognizing the fact that we need to make the same considerations for you as well. So do know that if your institution is all online, where it would typically be in person for this coming year, there is likely the possibility that we will evaluate your credit transfer. I think the specifics of that, you'll want to reach out to some of the individual institutions. We have a specific page at Amherst that will talk about some of the considerations. Some of you also may have moved to mandatory pass-fail grading. That particularly what might have happened in the spring 2020 semester. It happened at a lot of our institutions as well. So some of us have some policies about accepting some pass classes, particularly if your institution did not give you the option to even take a letter grade there. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. Luckily, a lot of the application components this year are online, as they have been for some time. So the submission of a lot of the materials is going to be relatively seamless, like it has been in previous years. There are some non-electronic submissions, things like PDFs. You might have encountered something called the college report or the transfer midterm report. If you are experiencing difficulties with any of those that are not application components, that are not right through Common Application, for instance, I do want you to know that you should reach out to us. We will have ways for you to we're thinking about them as we go along, just like you are. But we're all very individualized institutions, meaning we're very high touch. We have all our email addresses out there for a reason. It's so that you reach out to us. So if you're encountering any aspect of the application process and you're just like, I can't do this year because of the pandemic, or I don't know how the workaround is, always reach out, please.
Absolutely, great advice. And again, a number of you did ask about contacting us, and again, these email addresses are the best way to go about it. And in addition to, we'll send you this information on the back end as well after our second program concludes. So another question that just came up in the Q&A was about a little bit similar, somewhat to what I talked about with extracurricular activities and that very broad definition. But Adam, someone asked about including other certifications or other activities that are maybe based on work. And I think I would kind of spin this a little bit to include some of our veterans, like military service, JST stuff that they've done. How should they include that, and if so, how should it be included? How should they talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And the answer is definitely yes. So we are always interested in knowing about the outcomes that you've had and the time that you have spent getting these certifications, learning these skills. Military example is a great example, Alex. We have a lot of military applicants, all 5 of us, who have gone through certain specialties in the military, or their job or occupation has required certain kinds of certifications and skill development. We definitely want to know all of that. Others may, and if you're at a community college or you're looking to transfer, and some of you may be in extracurricular activities that actually require that certification. So one that comes to mind a lot with students I work with is students who might get an EMT license. And so they become a practicing EMT as part of a pre-health program. We love that kind of stuff. We definitely want to know how you've translated your interests and your passions into certifications, jobs, and new skills.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Adam. So another question, Patricia, as you manage kind of both the transfer program or Yale rather manages both the transfer program and then the Eli Whitney program for non-traditional students. Can you speak to a little bit to a question that came up about older courses? And I mean, we both talked about recent courses and that being important, but what about courses that were taken several years ago, 5 years ago or more? How are those reviewed in the admission process, and then also importantly for transfer credit?
We will look at an applicant's entire history, academic history, and take them and review them in context. We require students to submit their high school transcript, even if they might have graduated from high school 20 years ago. But we understand that they were taken, those classes were taken a long time ago. We'll take them into consideration. For us, whether a class is transferable, there isn't an expiration date. So even though you might have taken a class 15 years ago, if it is transferable because they're classes that are similar to what Yale offers, then they will become transferable. But certainly the admissions committee will put more weight on how you have done in recent courses, and the longer that you've been out of high school, the less emphasis we will put on that.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Patricia. Alex Diodezio, question came in a little bit related to what I was talking about in terms of explaining the trajectory, especially for non-traditional students. How can students speak about maybe even past mistakes that were in their own control, and how is that viewed in the admission process?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this goes back to everything that Patricia talked about with kind of our whole person review process, as she mentioned. Things like this, these specific kinds of one-off things where maybe you had to withdraw in a course or a whole semester because of extenuating circumstances, or things like that pop up and kind of feel like weaknesses in the file. This is a great moment to just address those head on, to know that we're going to see those, we're going to wonder about them. And if we don't have the context to understand those, then we're left to just make guesses and make assumptions. So it's best to just take the space to explain those. That might be the additional information box. It might be that it's an essay or some other space, but making sure that you find a place to put some words on that, to say, I faced a medical issue during that semester and it forced me to withdraw in the middle of the semester from all of my classes. But, you can see in my more recent performance that I've been able to step up since then and do better. Whatever it may be, whatever the particular circumstances are for you, the most important thing you can do is to just share that with us so that we can take that context into account, understand what was going on there, and really be able to use that as we consider the whole of your file and what you're presenting to us on the larger level. Overall, are you academically ready? Are you able to contribute to our campuses in meaningful ways? We won't hold those kinds of one-off examples against you if you're able to kind of show that you've moved beyond that.
Absolutely. And I think kind of just speaking from some of the experiences we have, I mean, we're not here to kind of judge necessarily. I know that sounds weird coming from an admission officer, but it is true. We're not kind of judging life experiences. It's part about what you're learning, what that's contributed to your journey. And again, who you are now, not necessarily who you were several years ago. And to give you even an extreme example, I mean, we do have formerly incarcerated students on our campuses who have completely changed course and are now studying at elite institutions and are absolutely capable of doing so. Lexi, you want to talk a little bit about a question that just came through about adjusting to the academic rigor of the coursework. Have you seen any examples or issues with that, or maybe speaking more broadly about what kind of support is offered for the transfer students as they adjust academically, but also beyond that?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and something that's good to be thinking about because it's likely on most of your minds. And frankly, it's on the minds of every student who ends up on our campus, regardless if they're coming to us as a first-year student or a transfer student. So thank you for asking that. I will say that, as our institutions are selective, we do not admit students that we do not think can succeed at our institution. So in the back of your mind, do know that if you end up applying and you are offered a place in one of our classes as a transfer student, that we have full confidence that you can do the work. It doesn't mean that you will be an A student, a 4.0 student the whole time. That is not necessarily our measure of success for all of our students. We very much believe, again, in that process of learning is something that's really important. And that might mean taking a sidestep or a failure, so to speak, which for some students is a B occasionally and things like that. And that's okay. I will say that some of our transfer students do experience a level of adjustment, I think, in that first semester. I think the intensity of the class, sometimes just the volume of work that's asked, meaning how much you might be asked to read or something like that. Occasionally students say they weren't reading primary texts in their academic classes before, but now they're asked to do that. But that's expected with a learning curve. That's totally normal. And I'll let you know that the GPAs of our transfer students a semester in are indistinguishable from the GPAs of our students who have come to us from high school and things like that. So do know that even though in that first semester, there's going to be some adjustments, it's a new place, it's a new kind of school, that is totally normal. And some of our students come in completely without missing a beat by any capacity. So do feel confident that if you are asked to join any of our communities, that we do feel that you can be quite successful with us. In terms of the other side of adjustment, social adjustment, moving to any of our institutions, thinking about joining our communities, not being a residential or being in a residential community, whether or not you are living directly on our campus or in the local community. We do, as Alex had mentioned before, transfer student communities. We often have very transfer specific orientation programs. A lot of us have very specific advising programs for some of our transfer students, meaning like additional meetings with our registrar to talk about transfer of credits and the time that you have on our campus. Specifically, we also have a transfer student seminar in our first semester. Each one of our institutions has different ways that you can engage with current transfer students on our campus, which I think is one of those most important ways to get acclimated, because there's going to be a lot of things about any institution that no matter how much you read, you might not know about, but it's really nice to have somebody to be able to turn to in your dormitory and walk down the hall and ask, hey, how did you know to do this? Or what's some advice that you had? So a lot of different resources to support you both academically and socially. We all have counseling centers on our campus. A lot of different resource centers, multicultural resource centers. We have a transfer student resource center on our campus too. So do know that we do have a lot of resources to think about you, not just as an academic student, but also as a person too.
Absolutely, and I think we could add that to a lot of this kind of liberal arts philosophy and the way liberal arts colleges are built in terms of supporting students. And part of the reason we have such high graduation rates is not just because all of our students are brilliant. I mean, they're all strong in different ways, but also because there are so many lopsidedly dedicated resources to every part of advising, and that absolutely includes some specific to the unique, not challenges, but unique circumstances that transfer students, non-traditional students, veterans, and so forth might find themselves in. And kind of along the liberal arts line, another question that came through was about that and professional school or afterwards, after these processes. And we talked a little bit about kind of how this prepares you afterwards, but how does that work more mechanically? And I can speak to that a little bit because one of them was specifically about pre-med. I was a chemistry major in college, and I was pre-med for about 3 seconds until I changed my mind. So I've seen some of those resources, but basically, again, liberal arts colleges are not just, they're obviously teaching you in broad different areas, but they're giving you great opportunities for a depth of study in your academic major, but also in your research in some cases as well. And then also in the academic advising. So at Princeton, for example, for pre-med, we have a group of health professions advisors called the HPA, which a Health Professions Advising Network, which works with those students, helping them prepare for what kind of courses is a medical school or professional school going to be looking for you to take an undergraduate. And they'll work with you to provide those resources, provide that kind of track, if you will, in those courses as you build up towards applying for medical school, looking for internships or whatever. So those resources, just because you don't have those professional schools on our campuses as liberal arts colleges in some case, except Yale, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not at a great advantage or not supported in kind of applying to those processes, because we see so many of our students going towards those directions after our programs as well. So I'm just looking through the other questions that we have submitted here as well. Another question was just more about the application and putting together the application if you don't feel like you're comfortable writing about yourself, or writing's not your strength necessarily. I don't know if any of you have specific tips you want to throw out there. I usually kind of advise students in terms of what you want to write about. Don't start thinking you're just going to sit down and write that perfect essay. Sometimes it helps to kind of like free write a little bit and think about what are the things that you want to highlight that you think are most important to highlight in that application. Adam, any tips for kind of getting in depth and writing about yourself on the application? It doesn't come easily to you.
Yeah, I mean, I usually say 2 or 3 things. One is that your best writing is your rewriting. Don't send us your first draft. Write, edit, write, edit. Writing is a process, not a divine event. And so make sure that you present to us an essay that is well thought out and reflected upon. The second thing is answer the question. Many students will write an essay and then they try to fit that essay into the box that is multiple applications. That doesn't always work. Really try to write a piece of writing that answers the question of the institution that you're applying to. I think that is key to making sure that you're being specific in a way that respects the question the institution is asking and sends the right messages that you want to send as an applicant. And third, it's about you. Make sure that you are writing an essay that is about you. Every year, we'll read essays that spend the majority of their time talking about someone else, a mentor, a grandma, an experience, a commanding officer, something that is inspiration in some ways, and maybe you're trying to tell us about how much this person or this action influenced you, but you spend so much of your time discussing the person or the action that you don't really get to the you. And so there's usually just a few sentences that actually talk about your experience or your growth or your reflection. Reverse that. Spend the majority of the time talking about you and the minimum amount of time necessary talking about the other person or action.
Definitely great advice, Adam. So keep that in mind. And then just again, looking to those who can support you in the process, whether it's at your college or whatever, get in touch with them, because chances are, if you have those resources, they've worked with students like yourself in this process as well. So this was another question that came through that was specific to just a couple of us, but I want to expand it a little bit more. And it's about preparing for a given major in terms of how that declaration process works. Patricia, can you speak to a little bit about, because you talked about credit transfer, what a student should be thinking about if they have a specific major in mind, or maybe if they're completely changing gears and they want to major something completely different than what they've been majoring at community college?
Sure. I think at all 5 of our institutions, we don't have specific classes that we require you to take before submitting an application or to apply to a specific major. So my suggestion would be to take a well-rounded course load and take, writing class, humanities class, social science class, etc. If, however, you are planning on majoring in a STEM field, I always encourage students to take as much math as possible, or the right level math for you, simply because no matter what field of science you're interested in, math is the foundation. So I don't think that you can go wrong if you focus on taking at least some writing courses and some math classes. And I would encourage students to avoid taking non-liberal arts and science courses if possible, unless that's sort of your major, and to avoid taking classes like communications classes, criminal justice classes, business classes that we don't offer at the undergraduate level. Back to you, Alex. Did that answer your question, Alex, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to kind of think about the credit. And also, I think for the most part, this can vary different institutions, but we're not generally asking you to declare a major on entry. So you usually have some time to figure that out. Lexi, I'm going to pass this one off to you because I think it's a really well written question. I think you have a really good answer for it. So I'm actually going to read it verbatim. So a lot of community college students, a lot of community colleges that have students that did not perform well in high school, and therefore that's the reason they enrolled in junior college. How much is that weighted? For example, my counselor told me that top schools look at transfers as older high school students. Is this true?
That is a good question. And I hope I live up to your putting me up to a good answer there. But I think what I've recognized about our transfer student populations, and I'm sure that all of us have done this, and what is something that's so exciting about working with our transfer student populations is that there's not a one fit approach. I mean, there are so many different people that are attending community colleges, and you probably look around in your classes and you see that, different people are attending community colleges for completely different reasons. And that range of why people are kind of showing up and what brings them there, I think is something that's amazing about that kind of experience. And because we practice holistic admission, and we are very much looking at you in the context of your own personal circumstances, of your own journey. And, what Adam was talking about as well in the essays is own that, tell us about who you are and what that is, and be okay with that, because we're going to be okay with that too. So if you're coming right out of high school and going right into a community college, we will look at some of those high school experiences. But the college opportunity, and as Patricia was saying in her slides, we're going to look much more heavily on what you are doing right now. What you will want to do is tell us about some of those different pivot points in your life. What is different right now about your approach, or why can you achieve at this level right now as a student and you didn't do that? Maybe that was 2 years ago. Maybe that was 15 years ago, right? If it was 15 years ago, that's going to be much more removed than someone that's gone right on from high school to community college. So I don't think that there's one right answer there. But again, we're looking a lot more about what you're doing in your current opportunity. And if there is something that you're going to submit, and we will ask to see your whole educational history, each one of us, no matter how long ago some of that was, and I mean from the beginning of your high school experience to right now, you will want to address that at some point. And it doesn't mean you tell me all the nitty gritty about everything that was happening, but we will want a sense of how that has evolved for you, or what some of those different opportunities are that allow you to be more present or to execute on your intellectual ability right now in a way that you weren't able to do that before. So I hope that covers some of it. But we're very individualized. I think we very much understand that every person is coming to us from an individual perspective and with an individual journey. And that's why we ask so much information in our application. So trust that, we're taking all of that into consideration too.
Thanks, Lexi. And you're absolutely right. I did put you on the spot a little bit there, but I knew you'd give a great answer, and you of course delivered. So thank you for that insight. We're coming up a little bit on time. Like I said, there are still questions we haven't answered yet. We're doing our best, and we have, I think a lot of ones that are still open. We've at least touched upon some of those themes. But again, while we get to everything, we do encourage you to reach out to us, and we can circle back and make sure we get your questions answered. So I think maybe just one last question that I'll pitch to everybody in something that was answered, and just have each of us give a quick response. What are common misconceptions about the transfer processes or transfer programs at our school? Let's go. I'll go last, but otherwise we'll start alphabetically. Lexi, if you can kick it off, put you on the spot again.
Yeah, I'll hammer home that every piece of the application matters. There are wonderful articulation programs that many of you are probably looking into at a lot of your state institutions. And occasionally I hear from students like, oh, well, the essay doesn't really matter because I've got these particular courses in this GPA, so I'm not going to worry about that much. So do know that we spend a lot of time, you spend a lot of time putting together your application. And so we spend a lot of time putting together thought into how you've crafted your education or your application. So know that everything that we're asking for is something that we're taking into consideration. That doesn't mean that there's a right or wrong answer to how to answer these questions, but it does mean that we're asking you to reflect on that in a way that is true to you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest misconception is that because many of us have relatively small transfer cohorts every year, that we somehow don't have resources or supports for transfer students that you might have at large public universities, particularly those with articulation agreements. And what I would say is, one, that's a complete myth, in part because we're very intentional about who we admit and who we want on our campus and our community. And that intentionality, the reason why we're intentional is because we know that we serve certain students well. And so we are trying to make sure we enroll students in order not just to educate them, but to allow them to completely thrive. And so once you get on our campus, we are going to throw everything at you. You're going to get resources and supports. You're going to get mentorship. And if you need tutoring, you're going to get tutoring, internship support. You're going to get all sorts of people who are there to cheerlead you, support you, and most importantly, challenge you, because that is what we do best. And that's why our graduates at these 5 institutions in particular are so successful.
Yeah, I completely agree with both what Lexi and Adam have said. I'll add a misconception that I think is connected to some of the questions that I saw coming up in the Q&A, which is a lot of students were asking about really kind of specific majors or really specific pathways, some of which we don't necessarily offer at our schools, being liberal arts colleges. And I'll just say that a common misconception can be, well, I want to study business, and therefore, since business is not a major offered at your school, that's not a good opportunity for me. That's not the right place for me. And while there are so many considerations in considering fit, I'll say that really our students and our graduates at all of our institutions go on to do a wide variety of different career paths, including things like business or engineering, or all kinds of things that aren't specifically listed under our majors, but are absolutely pathways that our students are able to take full advantage of and thrive in. And so really thinking broadly about what the liberal arts model means, about what your education can look like, and how you're able to pursue the different kinds of fields that you're ultimately interested in, I think is really important when you're considering the college search process and considering these questions of fit.
And for me, I want to echo what Alex from Williams had said earlier in the presentation about all of our institutions being affordable. I think the misconception sometimes is that we are private schools, so we are too expensive. And I just cannot emphasize enough that all 5 of our colleges offer or have very generous financial aid policies, and there should be no student who's admitted to our institutions who says, I cannot come because I cannot afford it. And that for some students, it can be actually less expensive to attend our colleges than public and state institutions. So I just really want to kind of hammer home the fact that we are affordable options.
Absolutely can't overstate that. And I think for mine, I would just add something that's been stated a little bit, but also I think related to that that concept of being able to having the preparation coming from a community college or a non-traditional trajectory or whatever, or prior past performance a few years ago, means you're not able to be successful at Princeton, at Yale, at Williams, Amherst, Pomona, or any top tier institution as well. Adam did a great job of talking about just how many of the resources there are to support you, but those supports aren't there to give you something you don't have. They're basically there to help you capitalize on the strengths, on the abilities that you already have. And I think these are conceptions that a lot of students maybe have in their self-doubt, or maybe there are other people in your community, other communities are telling you you don't have what it takes necessarily because you're at a community college or whatever. And honestly, I imagine there used to be people at our own institutions who maybe felt that way as well. And I think they're realizing how wrong they are. I know all of our transfer students individually, they are just as capable and brilliant as any student we have on campus. And in a lot of cases, much more interesting as well. And they're some of the best members of our community. And we're really excited to have them as well. So I definitely can't overstate that. So as we begin to wrap up, because we're just about out of time, I do want to point out something that a few of you asked about, and we've mentioned on the next slide. The next session that we're hosting this Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. You can sign up on the URL there. It's going to be basically the same thing as well. So it's not like a two-part or anything like that. But you are absolutely welcome to attend that as well if you had connection issues or whatever. But we will look to send you a recording from either this session or the next one if you were registered as well for either of those programs. And then there's another quick point to mention if there are any active duty or veterans with us as well. We did a similar session like this specifically for military affiliated students, active duty or veterans as well. We recorded that session, which you can access at this URL as well, /military session. It was in collaboration with some of our partners that you see listed here. Great nonprofit partners. Can't say enough about them. For all active duty veteran students except Leadership Scholar is specifically for Marines, but I highly recommend connecting with those for any active duty or veteran students who are not already done so and are looking at this process as well. We spell a little bit more out about that in the process, in the video rather, as we recorded earlier. So with that, we want to respect everybody's time. We try to get through as much as we could. Again, maybe didn't cover everything, so please do get in touch with us, check out our resources and everything. We'd be happy to continue the conversation with you going forward. But with that said, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. We hope you all stay well, stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll hear from you soon. Goodbye, everyone.